Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Pod Theory. As always, I'm your host, Jason Cercone, and today we're going to talk about the biggest mistake you can make with your podcast. Now, you and I both know there are a ton of mistakes you can make with your podcast. If you've listened to past episodes of Pod Theory, you know how strongly I feel about developing an initial plan before you launch your podcast. Developing your ideas and having a clear-cut blueprint on why you're doing a podcast, what you want it to accomplish, who your target audience is, and much more is all crucial to your podcast taking off. Ever heard the saying, failing to prepare is preparing to fail? It applies here. Not planning for your podcast will ultimately lead to failure. But even that isn't the biggest mistake you can make. Not adhering to the cardinal rule of it's all about the listener. That's a big one too. If you're not keeping your listener in mind with the content you share, the sound quality of your recording, or if you're misleading them and not delivering on what you advertised, they're not coming back, period. What about not releasing your content consistently? This is a big mistake many podcasters make, and it leads to more and more shows getting left on the side of the road for dead. Your listeners expect a certain level of consistency, and if they're used to your show hitting their podcast app every Friday, for example, they depend on that. And if your show isn't there waiting for them when they go to listen and you didn't inform them that maybe you were taking a week off, they're going to find another podcast that does deliver new episodes on time, that does come out as advertised, that does exactly what they're expecting. Consistency is key. Never make that mistake. Taking your audience for granted, it's another mistake and an extension of what I was just talking about with consistency. You might think your audience will always be there for you. But with so many podcasts available, there just aren't enough hours in a day to consume everything. People are going to prioritize what they listen to based on what resonates the strongest. And if you take an approach where you feel your listeners will continue to download your show no matter what you serve them, spoiler alert, they won't. How about not investing in good equipment? As I've covered on past episodes of Pod Theory, you don't need to break the bank when it comes to your equipment, but you don't want to scrimp or buy used equipment because you could compromise the quality of your production by doing that. Focusing on quality, focusing on engaging content, and focusing on consistency are going to help you avoid these and several other mistakes that you can make. But what is the biggest mistake you can make with your podcast? It's giving up on it before it's had a chance to grow. It can be easy to look at low download numbers or lack of reviews and immediately think podcasting just isn't working for you. But that's simply not the case. Now, I've talked at length on here about podcasts with no plan failing, and I talk about it so much because I absolutely believe it. But even a podcast with a solid foundational plan won't see immediate results. The only way you can gain enormous download numbers right out of the gate with the very first episode you release is if you have an audience already developed from social media, from videos, from emails, from blogs, or from a certain level of celebrity stardom. If you produce a show and you have a huge audience that you've advertised to and you've done that effectively, then sure, you may get those big numbers. But from the start, if you're starting from scratch, it's important to keep your eye on the big picture. Your podcast is a content machine that's going to continue to grow, it's going to continue to evolve, and it's going to continue to find listeners the more content you produce. Remember this, even the most popular content producers and podcasters in your niche started somewhere. Don't be ashamed of minimal results at the very beginning, and do not throw in the towel because of them either. Now, I don't have the exact numbers, but I guarantee you there are thousands of podcasts out there that stopped dead because the producer didn't get instant results and therefore felt their time was better spent on something else. Guess what? Instant results aren't real. Look at all the social media accounts getting flagged right now because people buy followers thinking that an inflated number will lead to instant results. It's nothing more than a vanity metric, and vanity won't build you an actual audience. Just like everything else you've earned in your life, you have to work for it. And giving up on your efforts before they've had a chance to blossom is the biggest mistake you can make with your podcast. And that's it for today's session of Pod Theory. If you're a fan of this episode or any of the other 44 that came before it, please let me know by dropping a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. I'd love to hear your feedback so I can keep Pod Theory going in the right direction. Good talk. I'll see you back here next time. This has been Jason Cercone on Pod Theory.